All right, all systems are go here, and we are live. And it is the Friday FARcast. Oh, and look who is with me. There she is, the Peachmeister, getting in on the internet action, and she's my support animal. You know, Peachy and Jasper are both my support animals, and they have different roles that they play. And Peachy plays a very specialized role when I go into controversial topics. Jasper is there to uh, help me channel a bit of a more conservative view on things, and I appreciate both of them in terms of their intention and then their participation in all of this. So thank you very much, Peachy. As I wade into the chaos that was last week, welcome to the Friday FARcast. I'm not going to do a super long show today. I'm going to try to keep it at about an hour because I've been doing a lot of content this week and I did an absolutely great show with David on Wednesday night. If you haven't caught it, many of you have. Um, I highly recommend it. It's a long watch, but I got to say, we're never boring. Like David and I are never boring, and we bring sort of different things to the table, and it's a really great process that just kind of catalyzes each other. And if you want to experience that live, we're going to be at the Bridge event, and that's going to be in October. And there's still a discount available. The link for the Bridge event is in the description of the show. And David and I are going to close out the weekend on Sunday night, and I'm really looking forward to it in a big way. And I think that's going to be streamed as well. I don't know the full details around that, but for those of you who cannot attend, I'm sure there's going to be an opportunity for you to experience the streaming aspect of it. But it's always better live. I'm just saying, it's always better live. So, yeah, a lot of content this week. Yesterday, I did about an hour and 40 minutes over on Rumble, and I got into a topic that David and I touched on during his show, and I wanted to go a bit deeper with it. And I'll just give you a brief summary. I'm going to try to make a separate video because I spent about the first 45 minutes talking about the Partridge Family and Queen. I had to go there a little bit. But the summary is that when we get to Epstein, which is ground zero now, it is part of a wave that has what I call a force multiplier through a series of events and movements that are all feeding into the Epstein affair. And I start basically with what happened with Jerry Sandusky at Penn State and the Last Mile Foundation that was set up by the alumni of Penn State to bring in boys from single parent households, mothers, no fathers. And the alumni were supposed to be like mentors for these young boys. Well, it didn't always go down like that. And Jerry Sandusky was connected to this Last Mile Foundation. Sandusky was a coach at Penn State, and he would be part of that experience and kind of introduce these young boys, 12, 13 years old, into the vaunted, legendary Penn State Nittany Lion football program world, coached at that time by Joe Paterno. It's quite interesting that the name Paterno also is related to Paternus, or the father. And Joe Paterno always had that kind of fatherly, like Joe Paterno looked like he was 50 when he was 20. And then he never really changed. He just kind of got shorter and his glasses got thicker. So Sandusky would bring these kids into the football side of it to give them a taste of the Penn State program. And then the stories come out about what Jerry Sandusky was doing with some of these kids. And there was a testimony of an assistant coach who there's a graphic moment coming here. So if it's too much for you, just put your fingers in your ear. He saw Jerry Sandusky sodomizing one of these young men in a shower at Penn State. And that sort of gets this whole thing rolling. And what's interesting is that the Sandusky stuff starts to percolate right at the end of Saturn in Libra, which is roughly like the summer of 2012. In October of 2012, Saturn moves into Scorpio. And I don't know if it's on my website still, but I looked at this and I said, Saturn in Scorpio is going to be the beginning of a period of time when we will be shown these lurid events that are staged by people in theoretically respectable places. That would be Saturn, right? And I can see it coming. And sure enough, the dam breaks on Sandusky. And then shortly after, the whole Jimmy Savile affair, high strange, weird, starts to break. And Jimmy Savile is like, he's the fixer. He's the pedophilic fixer for the elite in England. Whether it's athletes, musicians, politicians, he was the guy, right? He had access to kids all the time. And he had his foundation and his TV show, Jim Will Fix It, and it almost always focused on kids. I mentioned this before. You can find this on the internet. There was a picture of Jimmy Savile with a young Keir Starmer, who is now the Prime Minister of England. And there has been some back chatter for a while that Keir Starmer happens to be gay and that he has the beard process going on, which doesn't surprise me because almost everybody in Europe who is in a position of power is compromised, and they're either queer, bisexual, or they're not even occupying their own sex. That's the story of leadership in England. And so, yeah, Keir Starmer's there, and the stories of Jimmy Savile leak out, and a lot of them are quite horrific. You can just look at him. You can see that this is a guy that is exuding like creepiness and evil, right? And that's where it all starts. It's with those two, and it keeps going, right? It starts to this momentum starts to happen with pedophilia. And if you go into Savile world, like he is the fixer. He's the guy. Jim Will Fix It. He's a fixer. And he's the guy that finds the kids for people that are inside of Parliament, inside of the sports and entertainment world. And it's huge, right? That gets this ball rolling. And then it starts to continue. It doesn't stop there. if we begin to fast forward this a little bit, right? We get into 2016, and with the WikiLeaks dump, there's of course the Comet Ping Pong Pizza and all the stuff that goes along with it, and James Alefantes and the tunnels and really weird pictures of kids being taped down, the bands that play because they have a concert space there, like a club. The bands that play there have really weird lyrics uh, that point to very dark and um, you know, just deranged relationships with children. Now that's coming up, right? There's John Podesta. He comes up. And then there's the high strange of the two guys that were seen around Madeleine McCann in Portugal. The two guys that could be potential um, perps, and they have a sketch rendering, and it looks like John Podesta and his brother. And then we see pictures of art in John Podesta's house, and we see pictures of art in his brother's house, and they're pornographic and they're pedophilic, right? They're paintings, and so now the public is starting to see all this. It's starting to rise to the surface, and it becomes part of this wave that starts with Jerry Sandusky in 2012. And then once that happens, it starts to blow the lid off of everything. The next part of this conversation and this momentum takes place in 2017, and it's Q. And Q talks about kids in cages, tunnels, and it's force multiplying to everything that's gone before it. And Q is widely popular, and it is like what's the word I'm looking for? It's like an amplifier, and it takes average everyday people, like I call them baseball moms, and brings them into this world. It's an accelerator. It's like a greenhouse, and things grow very quickly. And along with this information, there's also kind of the esoteric and occult side of Q, which I don't want to get into right now, but I will at some point. And they're being indoctrinated, right? They're being indoctrinated into kind of an open source secret society. And 5 years down the line, the people who've been following all these drops, they'll just tell you that if you're not cued, you don't understand it. You're not going to get it because there's been too many clues and too many things that have been. And I'm not saying that some of those things aren't true, by the way, because I think that they can be true. Because at certain points, in order to keep the momentum going, there has to be something that gives people a sense that it's real and it's happening. But Q plays a huge role in this, massive. And then you have the accumulation of other like figures coming into play. And this is almost like a modern mythology that is being unveiled before our very eyes. Anthony Bourdain plays a role. And one of the things that he does is he's going to go after Hillary Clinton. Although he does say that he would poison Trump's food if he was the chef of the White House. So Bourdain is in this, right? And then you start to see the celebrity stuff. You start to see Tom Hanks. You start to see the Frazzle Drap, Wilson, the volleyball, Oprah, and it's all connected to kids. And Hillary is definitely a part of it, right? She's definitely a part of it. And so now this is adding again to the momentum. Along the way, we have the movie The Sound of Freedom, which is the cinematic portrayal of everything that I've been talking about in some ways. Kids captured, trafficked, Central America somewhere. And it is the visual representation of everything that people who have been on this trail have been looking for. And when you go to a movie, there's something magical but also manipulative about movies. Like once you walk through that door and you sit in that darkened chamber, which for me is like a theater of dreams. You suspend your disbelief. Like that is an agreement that you have with that experience. You suspend your disbelief because you're entering into a world that will present other realities, other constructs, other narratives. And if you don't suspend your disbelief, you can't enjoy the movie, right? You're looking at it, you're asking yourself, why am I here? And it's a really interesting kind of covert agreement we have with that experience. So when you go into a movie like The Sound of Freedom and your belief is suspended, then everything you see on the screen takes on a fraction of reality. It becomes real. And my first experience of this was when I was a kid. And I watched Death Wish with Charlie Bronson. I watched it on TV. I didn't see it at the movies, but I watched it on TV. And after seeing Death Wish, me and my buddy, and I lived in like suburban San Jose. Me and my buddy got our pellet guns out and we started walking around the neighborhood, looking for, some perp to take out. This is the power of movies. And it's very silly, but I was ready to go, man. I was ready to play Paul Kersey. So when you go to a movie like The Sound of Freedom, and you already you're there for a reason, right? You're like, maybe some people are like, well, let me check this out. I've heard about it. Let me step into this world. But most people that went to The Sound of Freedom went there because they wanted to see the operation. They wanted to not only see the operation, but they also wanted some form of vindication and justice. And that's what the movie brings to the table, right? And what it does is and I'm not saying the movie is factually correct or incorrect, but what it does is it confirms people's biases and fires them up and wants them to go out and protect children even more, right? So that's all part of this. And along the way, you have these other strange things that start to come up. Some of them are more adult oriented, like Nexium. I dropped into Nexium a lot when it was happening. And there was never any evidence that there were children involved. There was evidence that there were a couple of teens involved, and some of whom were actually from Mexico who wound up coming to New York and were part of that operation. But it wasn't the bulk of the operation. It was people like Stormy Daniels, who was connected to Nexium. And so that all feeds into it. But again, that's like weirdly consenting adult shit, right? And then you have Keith Raniere, who is pushing this religion, right? He's pushing this religion. He's pushing like he's a genius and he's doing all these things. And he's got the Bronfman girls. He's got Kristen Gillibrand's father. He's got that actress who left Hollywood and became part. So Nexium becomes part of the story, although it's not directly linked to children. Although there are a few people who are not quite of age who wind up in the Nexium system. But that's not the bulk of it, but it's part of it, right? You've got Marina Abramovich, spirit cooking. And you have this whole other narrative coming in that it's not just about violating kids, right? It's adrenochrome and cannibalism and preying upon the most innocent. All these things are part of the dark Epstein cosmology. All of it. Because when you get into Epstein world, you start to see everything I'm talking about, and then the girls who are servicing these men, and they're underage, roughly between like 13, 16, right around there. And again, I don't want to get into the weeds around this, but I will tell you that there was a core group of those girls that Ghislaine Maxwell started to connect with. And those girls would go out and recruit other girls. And a lot of those girls were not trafficked. They didn't show up missing. A lot of those girls came from actually wealthy families. This dirty little secret about Epstein world. And some of these, there's a number of these girls who are into it. They get paid. They're not in a cage, right? And they get paid really well. And that's another kind of dark part of all this that doesn't really get talked about very much. Now, some of them are there against their will. When you get into Virginia Giuffre Roberts and her relation with Lex Wexner, like it sounds like there's a lot of like psychological torture and programming going on there, right? So not all of them are ready, willing, and able to go and give some Ehud Barak a hand job or whatever, right? But it's still part of it. Now, one of the things that isn't talked about with Epstein is that there were much younger girls involved. That's a different story. It's a different dynamic. There was a group settlement for a lot of these women who were victims of the Epstein experience, and they got paid. And part of the payment and part of the agreement was that they could not testify against Jeffrey Epstein or Ghislaine Maxwell moving forward. They made a deal. Not all of them did, but a lot of them did. You can look it up. And one of the problems that the lawyers and the negotiators for these deals and the mediation that they ran into were these younger girls. Like they couldn't make deals for them. Because if they did, it would be very difficult. And if you go back and sort of do the timeline on the Epstein stuff, so the girls that were like 13, 14, 15, 16, when it was happening, these deals are made and they're over 18 at that point, right? So they're actually able to represent themselves. Those other girls, those young girls, they couldn't. Many of them still weren't even 18 by the time they came around to do the mediation. So there were much younger girls. And if you look at the island, Epstein Island, with the strange kind of mosque-like structure that was there, and there was more on the island. Um, the story is that there were levels in Epstein Island, and there was one level where you could get a 15-year-old from the Upper West Side, right? Give you a massage and then take care of business. But these were literal levels, and that the deeper you went, the darker the experience was. So that's not to say that there weren't young children involved with Epstein. There were. You just don't really hear about them. You hear about Maria Farmer, Virginia Giuffre Roberts, and a few others, right? But Epstein is the tip of the iceberg for all of this. So when Trump did what he did, he wasn't just pumping the brakes on Epstein and saying, get over it. He's saying, get over the kids in cages, get over the kids in tunnels, get over spirit cooking, get over adrenochrome, get over Jimmy Savile, get over Jerry Sandusky, get over all of it. Because you can't talk about Epstein without the other things that are connected to it. You can't. And that's why people have had such a difficult time with how this thing has played out in real time in the Trump administration. And then being castigated and called out and told that it's just a Dem conspiracy, right? And you fell for it and blah, blah, blah. It completely removes all the other material that feeds into Epstein. Like Epstein is the ocean, and all these other things are the rivers that lead into Epstein. And so, and I don't think people like, yeah, we want to see it. We need to see it. We need the transparency. We want, we want the pedo shit to end. But I don't think those people fully understand that they're also carrying the weight of all this other information. And that's why it has been so impactful on so many levels. So I tried to tie all those things together because they're all part of the story. And then the other part of this is where it gets difficult. And we're going to get into this Uranus piece really quickly, I promise, because Epstein is part of it. Oh, by the way, I didn't make the connection, but it's also part of the story where really since I would say about 2017, 2018, there was a major push to reassign sex to young people. That's real, right? And we can throw in trans story hour and all those things, right? That's part of the story too. Like these are all feeding the outrage. And then, and you have Desmond, the happy gay trans kid or whatever the fuck his name is. It's all part of the story. It's all part of the outrage. It's all part of this sense that on a certain level, our children have been abducted. And they don't even have to go missing and be on a milk carton. That through the internet, through bad parenting, weird peer pressure, social programming, they have abducted many of our children. And then you have parents who are complicit in that abduction. It's like when Kathy O'Brien went into MK Ultra world. Her father gave her up. There was a business deal. And once he gave her up, his community and financial status rose. And what we had during the whole trans thing is very similar. Parents were giving up their children to have them surgically reassigned. But they weren't getting any money out of it. They weren't getting any clout, at least from the business community or whatever. They were getting clout from their friends and their social group, and they were being rewarded for being progressive and open parents. And it was actually this weird feedback loop where they were being held up as a standard of compassion and care because they were willing to buck the societal norm and get their kids on hormone blockers and have them sexually reassigned. That's all part of it. So when we talk about Epstein, we have to talk about all these things. And so this whole trans thing is really an abduction hidden in plain sight. It's what it is. We know that kids go missing, but when your own child becomes another child or another version of itself, that's a form of abduction. And it literally has been a state-sponsored abduction. Many court cases, one here in Texas, famous one, where the husband was pushing back on his wife and saying, "No, don't make my son a girl." And he lost his case. Pretty tragic, actually. That's abduction. And then you have on the other side of the political aisle, when Donald Trump was president and he was trying to get tougher with the border, you have AOC down at the border looking through this fence, right? The cyclone fence in her pristine, pure, spiritually white garment. And it's a fake, it's a total photo op. But the left is doing this thing where they are trading on the currency of children. And the right has its own version of it. And at the center of it is this manipulation of people and their relationship to children. Because the idea of children is that they are sacrosanct, they should be protected, they're innocent, right? They're not the ones that are making the decisions for their life. And I agree with that, by the way. And so people have a very strong opinion about this, and they should. They absolutely 100% should. But what happens is that because it's such a core issue for people, and people can get very emotional about it, they can be easily manipulated. Because the issue itself has a certain righteousness attached to it, right? If anybody tells you anything different, like, that, oh yeah, we should let kids, have relationships with 15-year-old perverted men, 50-year-old perverted, like if they say it's okay, right? That is an aberration. Because we, as a society and a culture, in the mainstream, and I'm not talking about pockets of Satanism or pockets of like what happened to Kathy O'Brien, and that stuff's been going on for a while. But mainstream, we have this idea that the children are to be protected, and I firmly agree with that. But what happens is that because we have such a strong feeling about it, and there is a sense of moral indignation and righteousness, which I believe is also appropriate, people get played. And all you have to do is bring up something with children and just watch how people react to it. They get very emotional. They get triggered, is a word that I would use. And I thought about this, and I'm like, well, why does this happen? Besides the fact that we all know it's morally repugnant and wrong, it's the fact that most people have really unhealed parts. And I hate to use the word inner child because it's so cliche, but psychologically and psychically, they have really unhealed parts about their own upbringing. And so when they identify with children who are captured, tortured, have no say in how they're going to experience their lives, and even more tragically, may wind up, in a trash heap somewhere, right? It's not just them, it's the individual's relationship to that part of themselves where they've experienced a version of this in their own life, where they were helpless and they were held hostage by a parent, both parents, relatives, and suffered either sexual abuse, psychological abuse, neglect, whatever it is. And again, because I'm a working astrologer and I work with clients, there are a very small group of people who have really solid childhoods and solid upbringings. Most people have very deep wounds around their childhood. And a lot of people have done work in order to get through them, which I applaud. And other people are in the process. And there are people who don't know what to do, don't have the skills, can't really fully address it. And even when they try to address it, their parents are often in denial, or they may not even be around anymore to try to have some sense of closure. And so what happens is that those people are deeply affected by everything that I've just talked about. And this is unfortunate. This is an unfortunate truth. And I don't want to sound like I'm blaming victims here. But when this shit happens, we see it, we read about it, we hear about it, it hits the individual in their unhealed place. And what is their response? Outrage? Sure. Absolutely. Because if you were 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 years old, right, you probably had outrage, but you had no place to go with it. And even if you did, there's probably going to be at least one or two family members who can tell you to shut the fuck up. Religion plays a part in this. I've counseled a number of people who were violated through the church. We don't talk about that. Not, that's the mantra in the family. This is a really difficult part because until we can heal that, until we can have some form of individuation, which is what Jung would call it, because this is definitely part of the shadow. Until we can do that as a society to the best of our ability, we are always going to be triggered. We are always going to be manipulated, and they will use children at any time they want in order to get people to be upset, outraged, activated. And push a program, whatever they need to do. And by the way, this is not party related. You can be somebody who's a liberal and a Democrat, and you got a fucked up childhood, you're part of the club. You can be on the right if you had a fucked up childhood, you're part of the club. So it's not something that is that either party has a patent on. It's the one thing that actually joins us together because we were all children. We all went through something. It is a universal and collective experience, for better or worse. And then when we were children, and our worlds got turned upside down, and we're just trying to survive and keep it together. We're looking for somebody. We're looking for an adult. We're looking for a person to come in and say, this is wrong. This is not how you treat this child. And they weren't there for the most part. Now, for some people, pre-CPS, there may have been some kind of intervention. Like a family member or somebody might have stepped in and talked some sense into somebody's head. I'm going to share a story that speaks to what I'm talking about. I had a friend, really good friend, and he had something happen to him when he wasn't a child, he was like a early teen. And he and his brother went swimming, and his brother drowned. And he had to come back and tell his father what happened, that they were swimming and his brother drowned. And his father was an administrator, I believe, at a junior college, well educated. And his father didn't know what to do with his grief or anger. And so he says to this fellow who was my friend, this is during the day, it's morning, he's going off to work. And he says to him, when I come home, I'm going to beat the hell out of you. He's in pain, right? But he wants to blame the surviving brother. And this is the intervention part. Supposedly, he had a conversation with one of his coworkers. And his coworker's intervention talked him off the ledge, said, I wouldn't do that if I were you. And he didn't. But he also never came back to my friend and said, I'm sorry I said that. I apologize. I'm having a really hard time processing the grief and the loss of your brother. And so he lived from that point forward, waiting to get the hell beat out of him. And it was never brought up. And this is what I'm talking about. Like, if that guy hadn't had a conversation with his colleague, who knows what happens? It was still bad. It was still really, really bad. So we have this shared experience with each and every one of us. Some of you maybe not so much. God bless you. You genetics, epigenetics, whatever, right? You got a good deal. Be grateful. But for a majority of people, they're still looking for the adult, the person who is going to put a stop to the madness, to the insanity, to the pain that they experienced when they were young. And this is where Trump comes into play, right? Trump is the father, right? He is going to be the guy. He is going to be the figurehead that symbolically will take care of all of this. Like, he will stop the madness. He will call out the perps, and he will serve as kind of a psychopomp for everybody who has been wounded and deeply invested in the crisis of innocence for children. And that's why so much power has been given over to Trump for this particular role. And then when he does this 180, it's not just a betrayal of his campaign promises, whether they were explicit or implicit. It's a betrayal of the parent, right? It's the betrayal of the adults who might have been in the space of the trauma, who all of a sudden side with the perpetrator. This is, I think, the biggest crime. This is the biggest wound that is hitting people. And it speaks to two things. Number one, I don't think we should give anybody that power because, number one, it can corrupt them. And number two, we're not always sure that they would be responsible stewards of that power. So Trump isn't just the government, although he is. He's also this father figure who is going to come in, end it once and for all. And as a result of that, there are literally millions of people who might be able to reconcile their own pain and their own sense of abandonment and betrayal. And so when Trump does this, it triggers all those things. Now you're going to see a lot of gymnastics going on and the Pam Bondi thing. You pay attention because there's pieces of this that are kind of limited hang territory. And you're gonna see a lot of winning, and it's because of this is happening, right? Like there are people who are saying that Stephen Colbert is getting canceled, and it's the Epstein stuff that's being leveraged against him. Maybe, I don't know, but those same people who are saying that, they haven't taken into account that Joe Rogan has been canceled. That Dana White has said, Joe, you're not doing MMA anymore. So what's the difference between Joe Rogan and Stephen Colbert? Well, Joe Rogan still has a podcast, but the MMA side of Joe Rogan is really popular. And of course, who can forget the pictures of Trump and Dana White and Joe Rogan, right? And it eventually leads to Trump's appearance on Joe Rogan's show, where Joe Rogan helps push him across the finish line. And all of a sudden, Dana White says you're done. So are the Epstein files related to Joe Rogan? And he's being canceled now because of it? Causation isn't always correlation. So I just am urging all of you to try to stay as neutral as possible with this, because you're going to get hammered with a lot of information from a lot of different sides. And there's plenty of confirmation bias for everyone. The latest piece is the what was this like thing that was delivered to Jeffrey Epstein on his 50th birthday with all these different like messages from all these different people. And of course, there's this very strange message from Trump to Epstein. And of course, the White House is disavowing this. Remember, this is the Wall Street Journal that's putting this out. And the Wall Street Journal has been in the business of being a newspaper for a very long time. They clearly understand where the boundaries are when it comes to lying, right, and disparaging a person's character, sensationalizing it, right? They know where the boundaries are. If you don't think that the Wall Street Journal sat down with a team of lawyers before they published that, you don't really understand how this works with a newspaper like the Wall Street Journal. Character assassination. That's what we're talking about here. Libel, slander. Now, Trump is promising to sue the Wall Street Journal. He's going to sue him. And you see all these people, well, I'm never going to read the Wall Street Journal again. I don't know what their motivation is around it, but I can tell you right now, they didn't publish that without running it through not one, not two, not three, but probably about 5 or 6 different lawyers. All of this ties into the topic of today, which is Uranus and Gemini. And I'm going to just start with Trump, and then I'm going to move into some very bizarre places because things have gotten really bizarre quickly. It's like we woke up in an alternative reality, and the rules of engagement for that reality have changed almost overnight. And this is the nature of Gemini. Like, we're being given almost this glimpse into this strange, weird, chaotic world of a parallel reality where surprise and disruption are going to be a part of it. And Trump is at the center of it for now. Like, when he made these statements about his base, and you're stupid, I don't need you, right? You're just feeding into the Democrats. This is what I'm talking about. David and I went over this at length 2 nights ago. It's like there's one reality, one program, one agenda, and again, we're going to use Trump as the figurehead, and then all of a sudden, it's completely different. It's like night and day. And then you have people on another side that say, well, this is all part of a stratagem. And look, I have not read 5 years worth of Q drops. So I am not authorized to apparently debate this. That's another story. But Trump is at the center of this Uranian chaos. Why? Well, he's Gemini, and he's got a Uranus Sun Gemini conjunction. And everything is like flipping and pivoting around what has happened with Epstein. But it's not the only thing. Like, there's a lot more that is going on. There's one other thing I wanted to touch on with Trump before we get off the subject of Trump and get into some of the really high strain shit. There are people who do not believe that the version of Donald Trump we're seeing is the actual version of Donald Trump. And there are rumors circulating that the real Donald Trump is not even on this planet anymore. And when looking at the astrology of what happened in May, and David and I talked about this a lot, with the Mars transit across Trump's Pluto, and you had this James Comey 8647 thing, which is for me it was symbolic of that Mars Pluto conjunction. And if you look at Trump, this version seems to be shorter. And I know that there are a lot of people who will say, well, he's older, he's shrinking. He just keeps coming up short in a lot of these photos, right? And if you really go down into the rabbit hole and you're willing to embrace this idea of cloning. Now, when Biden was around, or whoever Biden was, people had no problem talking about cloning, doubles, whatever they needed to do in order to keep the illusion of Joe Biden alive. Things just didn't match. The ears were different, eyes were different, face was different, right? Like we went through 4 years of what the fuck? Who is this guy? Who's playing him? Is it an actor? Is it a clone? And when you go down that rabbit hole, the cloning rabbit hole, things start to make really weird sense. Many years ago, I've told this story before, I'll tell it again for those of you that are new. Many years ago, I was in Olympia, Washington, and there was a talk being given by a guy by the name of George Green. Some of you are probably familiar with George. He was a very early whistleblower, and his introduction to the elites came through the Carter administration because George comes from a cattle family in Colorado, very wealthy cattle family. And Jimmy Carter was thinking of putting George into his cabinet somewhere in the Department of Agriculture. And his stories about that are, at the time, they were really weird, but now they seem quite believable. And one of the stories he told was that he was at a hotel, and it was one of these 4-star hotels or 5-star, whatever. And he was there with Teddy Kennedy and this guy James MacArthur, who played Dano on Hawaii Five-O. Like they were there in the room with him, and Teddy Kennedy was like kind of grilling him and talking to him, and he's feeling him out. And George Green witnessed both James MacArthur and Teddy Kennedy doing copious amounts of cocaine. And not only that, but there were quite young women in the room and clearly connected to Teddy Kennedy. And so when he saw this, he's like, I want no part of this world, right? That was his introduction into the world. Now, I would have to believe him because James MacArthur is kind of obscure, right? But in some ways, it makes sense. He was the son of a, what was his name, Maureen MacArthur. His mother was an actress. Anyway, he tells this story at this talk. Now, keep in mind, this is Gulf War I, and I had been tracking George Bush very intently when it all started. Like that was my awakening into another kind of hyper reality. And I saw something with George Bush that was terrifying and kind of strangely awe-inspiring. Like I could see him at the onset of the Gulf War, like expand and have this incredible, like, sense of presence and power. I could see it. It's like, what is going on with this guy? It's almost like he was stepping into some kind of predestined supernatural role. And here's where he's talking about the New World Order for the first time. We're all hearing it for the first time. And then I saw him address a group of like bankers. This is all early CNN territory. And he's talking directly to them. And I remember feeling like he was talking to them in code in public. And I'm thinking, this motherfucker is on a roll, right? He's got all these countries behind him. He's got the banking community behind him. He's like, the revelation of the method, telling people about the new world order. It's like, here it is. This is the moment. And I'm watching him climb this steady peak. And then all of a sudden, I noticed a change in George Bush. And it was baffling to me because what I'd seen previously was almost like the image I would use be like a warlock really coming into his powers, right? And everything's available to him. The manipulation of reality, energy, right? The focal point for the great work, like that's all happening. And then what I saw later is like, who the fuck is this guy? This is not the same guy that I was watching weeks ago. And there was even this one moment where I saw him get off a plane in the Middle East. And he walked down the gangplank like he was a fucking zombie. Now, if you read Kathy O'Brien's books or book, clearly you will understand that George Bush indulged in hard drugs, including cocaine and heroin. Apparently he and Dick Cheney used to do speedballs. So and I didn't know that at the time, but I'm like looking back, I'm like, well, maybe he's just like smacked out, right? Now that I look back at it, but back then I didn't see it that way. I just saw that this guy wasn't the same. And when he spoke, he wasn't the same. He didn't have the same electricity in his voice. He didn't have that same sense of this is my divine or devilish or whatever destiny, and I'm living it. He didn't have that. So I was puzzled. And when I was at this talk with George, I said, what is going on with Bush? I said, he doesn't seem like he's the same guy. And George Green says it's because he's not. He hadn't said anything prior to this. He said, what you're seeing now with George Bush is a clone. And I'm like, oh, well, this is starting to make some sense, right? And that took me down the clone rabbit hole. And one of the things that he talked about, and other people have talked about as well, is the purpose of Camp David. Now, Camp David is theoretically this place where presidents go. It's not far from the White House, right? They got a nice pool there. It's like a cush joint. They make all your meals for you. You relax. Maybe you meet with the head of state or two. But George said that that's the cloning center for Washington, D.C. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So this idea that the current version of Trump is a clone, I don't have a problem with that. Particularly if he doesn't quite look the same. That's number one. And the other thing with clones is they have no soul, right? Now, there's this theory that the original person has to be alive in order for the clone to exist. I don't necessarily, I'm not a cloning expert, but I think they probably figured out a way to get around that loophole. But they don't have a soul. And so when you see somebody like Trump just do this 180, it's like, is that the action of a soulless person? I mean, you could make a case for it. So, well, did you sell your soul? And people are asking that question. Did you sell your soul to Israel because you want to protect them? Or maybe there's just no soul there now. And what happens with clones is that this is all Gemini territory, by the way. So just hang in there with me. What happens with clones is that each successive clone doesn't live as long. They have a shorter and shorter lifespan. They also don't function as well. And whatever kind of physical imprint that the original person had, that's transmitted to the clone, right? So if Trump was having problems with his health, the clone is not going to show up and be immediately healthy because they're using tissue and cell from the original version. And if that tissue and cell carries a malady, a disorder, it's going to be passed on. There's no, it's part of the equation. So what we could be seeing with Trump now is a version of him that was ill, but gets recreated through the cloning process. I'm just throwing this out there to you people because you tend to be open-minded. And we're in Uranus and Gemini, and there are a lot of people who are asking this question, and how could he do this? Well, if he was a completely another person or somebody without a soul, I think the answer, even though it's bizarre, tends to be kind of alternative Occam's razor. So Trump is the center of this high strange right now, this Uranus and Gemini moment. But trust me, there's a lot more to Trump and this high strange. So the next part, for like maybe the next half hour, I'm going to walk you through a few things that are in some ways kind of symbolic of the 180 flip. Okay. Let's talk about Grok. All of a sudden, Grok becomes Mechahitler Grok and starts spouting, all this really, quote unquote, hateful, anti-Semitic information, right? Like Grok, like there was a Grok before Uranus and Gemini, and then it's almost like Grok's evil twin comes up in Mechahitler Grok. And people are like, what the fuck? Well, it just got hacked. Well, that may be true. But again, if we're talking about Uranus and Gemini, it's almost like the evil twin of Grok shows up. Like the most evil twin you can find, Mechahitler Grok. And a lot of people laugh at it and think it's funny, but it's also entirely symbolic of this weird Uranus and Gemini flip. Now, the other high strange thing with all of this is fucking Elmo. Okay, this Elmo thing, again, well, Elmo was hacked. This Elmo thing is like another version of Grok. So let me show you if you're not aware of the Elmo stuff. I'm going to show you the original like tweets, but it's not just the tweets of Elmo. It's like the post Elmo memes and the post Elmo content, which is again completely and utterly like profane, right? Like Elmo was always having a good day, and now all of a sudden it's like dark Elmo. But it's not just dark Elmo. There is this really, how do I say this? Interesting is a word. Shocking series of pieces of content to go along with it. And one of the things that is also part of this story, right, is this kind of ongoing turf war with Israel, Zionism, Jews, and Jewish power. This is all part of the maelstrom, right? Like if you go into Epstein land, you're going to run into Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell, Mossad, Ehud Barak, right? That's all part of it. And this has been bubbling up for a while now. And people, number one, the majority of people are completely tired of what's going on in Israel. They have Israel fatigue. Okay, they have Zionist Israel fatigue. And you'll talk to Tucker Carlson, or Tucker Carlson will tell you, Candace Owens will tell you, well, these are Zionists, and they're not the Jewish people, and they are technically correct, right? They're technically correct. But then the other part, what we call the JQ, like that's coming up too. And so now you can't separate one from the other. And personally, I've never seen anything like this before, right? It's the first time in history where it's you have the floodgates open, and the most protected group and the most sacred of sacred cows, shout out to the red heifer, have been a protected class in a lot of ways. And if somebody stepped out of line, the apology happened real fast, right? Marlon Brando did it. He shot off his mouth one day. He said, "Oh, the Jews run Hollywood." Well, was he lying when he said it? I mean, if you do an honest, maybe not now. I don't know who runs Hollywood now, but back in the day when Brando was making movies, you just ran the numbers. It wasn't but 2 days later he's out there making an apology. And this is like an A-list actor, won the Oscars twice. Aries doesn't apologize for anything. Apologize. But that was the standard operating procedure. That was the program. And that's changed now. And the reason it's changed is because so many people are either talking about this in a salacious, sarcastic way, or like, for instance, Candace Owens, getting on her show 3 or 4 times a week, talking to her girls' club about this topic. Like the tube is out of the toothpaste. And because it's coming from so many directions that they just can't find one person and use them as an object and cancel them and show other people that if you cross this line, this is what happens to you. Your life is, for all intents and purposes, over. That's not happening now because there's too many people doing it, right? And some people will say, well, it's hateful, it's not respectful, it's not all Jewish people. And I will agree with that last statement, right? I will agree that it is not all Jewish people. I would agree with that. I have clients, there are people in chat, people listen to this, and they listen to it and they put up with me because deep down inside, they know the truth. They're able to self-reflect and say, yep, you're not wrong there. Emily Moyer, Danny Katz, close friends, good friends of the show. We have this conversation all the time. And they're willing to go there because they understand that there has been this institutionalization around their culture and their religion that has made it almost impossible to criticize and have any kind of scrutiny with. We could have it with the Catholic Church, we could have it with the Mormon Church, we could have it with, our dispensationalist friends, we could have it with Islam, any number of religious sects or groups, no problem. And by the way, they should all be scrutinized. They should all be looked at. They should all be held accountable for their hypocrisy. And I'm all for it, right? All for it. Not one group gets to carve out a special place from that process. Because if we're being truthful and we want to grow as humans, as spiritual beings, and truth is the central core to all of this, then it all has to be on the table, all of it. And that includes the touchiest subject that has been verboten for quite a while. And now the proverbial cat is out of the bag. And it's going to be interesting to see what happens around all of this. Now, Trump tried to jump in and create these anti-Semitic hate speech laws on campuses, right? Like you can't go to a campus and protest against Israel and divest, you know, boycott, whatever. Well, that's a control measure to try to keep the dialogue contained. But even when that happens, what does it do? It draws more attention to itself. And astrologically, like we're in Pluto and Aquarius territory. And when you do things like that, when you assert over control, which is Pluto, and it's Aquarius, it's going to backfire. It's going to have the opposite effect of the thing that you're setting out to do. So we are living right now in a universe where there's new rules of engagement. And it's not just rules of engagement when it comes to speaking your mind or telling the truth or um, putting any sacred cow under the microscope. It's how these things get played out when there are overt measures of control that are being exerted. It will have an opposite effect. So when there's more control that's either legislated or demanded, what's going to happen? There's going to be more chaos. There's going to be more of a social and psychic whiplash to the whole thing. And at least for me, I think it's interesting because the status quo cannot hold. And the status quo being defined by these institutional mandates. Aquarius is an anarchic. It's the nature of Aquarius. And we're in a new age. I mean, we're literally in a new age. But it's funny because when people would think about this and talk about this, like in the 80s and the 90s, it was supposed to look a certain way, right? Like we'd have all this amazing technology and we'd purify body, mind, spirit. We'd open our pineal glands, our crown chakras, and it was all about, the velocity of ascension. Like that was sort of the story. And if you were to tell people back in the 80s and the 90s that the new age was going to look very, very different, and it was going to be more about the tearing down of these monolithic structures, which have held us in place for a long period of time, and that the tearing down part would not necessarily be love and light, they wouldn't know what the fuck you were talking about. But that's where we find ourselves today. And we're just launching on this journey. And everything that's floating around our space is a part of it, including artificial intelligence, by the way. So let's go to Elmo land. And let's explore the phenomenon that was Elmo this week and then the fallout. Okay. So this is just one Twitter thread right here. Let's just start here. Elmo got hacked by the spirit of Adolf Hitler. Now I'm going to read this because, hey, this is Elmo, right? These are Elmo's words not mine. Elmo says all Jews should die. Fuck Jews. Donald Trump is Netanyahu's puppet because he's in the Epstein files. Jews control the world and need to be exterminated. Release the file, fuckers. Kill all Jews. Now, and chaos, right? Chaos. This is what we're talking about. Now, that could have a clearly deleterious effect, right? Like a very, like we're in, this is extreme. This is very extreme. But the idea that you have this Sesame Street character who's always nice all the time, gets hacked, and this is the message. Welcome to Uranus and Gemini, right? This is not the Elmo that we knew. This is Dark Elmo. This is the Uranus and Gemini dark doppelganger. And the comments are crazy. Elmo's mental breakdown this week didn't come out of nowhere. He spent decades watching commies take over public schools. DEI turned classrooms into therapy circles. Guidance counselors transient kids and students growing up to be a retarded socialist with pronouns. Like, this is the fallout. This is now part of this bizarre alterverse in cosmology. And is any of this false? I don't think so. Because we've all talked about it. The communists infiltrated public schools. DEI turned classroom therapists, guys, transient. That's all true. That is all true. And now Elmo is like this hellish spirit that's unlocked and unleashed all of this, right? And he is. PBS, by the way, Trump cut the funding for PBS this past week, whoever Trump is. Here we go. Moments before the cameras malfunction. Now you got Elmo sitting in the Epstein cell. Now this is a reality match, right? This is a culture hack. All these are culture hacks. So now you're blending like Elmo, who hit the third rail with a freaking sledgehammer, and this is what happens to him. But he's playing the role of fucking Epstein. Like, again, Uranus and Gemini. Epstein's now Elmo. I mean, we are living in this really weird, high strange, I have to say a little entertaining, ultraverse with Uranus and Gemini. This now, it gets even better. I may have found the source of Elmo's radicalization. All right. Elmo reacts to the Epstein list. They're like, it's like some guy with a fucking Elmo puppet. Oh, here we go. Look at this. Let's just watch this.
Elmo crazy? Crazy. Elmo, you need to calm down and take a deep breath.
No! Elmo says that! Elmo wants on the news on Epstein list right now!
Elmo's been going off about Epstein lately. I agree it's a cover-up, but you're acting a bit crazy.
Oh, you think Elmo crazy? Crazy!
He's just been saying some wild stuff.
And we all know who controls the media.
Easy, Elmo. Easy. This is an issue that's personal to Elmo.
If Elmo doesn't get padlocks by tomorrow, Elmo will believe he got some congressman.
Jesus Christ. Back in the late 90s, Elmo was tickled by some high-profile individuals.
Elmo wants the whole system to go down.
I get it.
Elmo, I think we should just trust the government. You know, they probably know what's best for us.
Yeah, shut up, Kermit. Elmo, where are you? Elmo? Elmo! No! La 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 la, la 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 la, Epstein's list?
You should have stopped asking so many questions.
I didn't have a choice. Elmo, you need to calm.
Who fucking needs Stephen Colbert or mainstream media when you have people doing this? Now here's Elmo with Joe Rogan. 109 countries, Joe. Elmo, not shitting you. That's the previous tweet. Right, you get to see it in all of its glory. Elmo may have had some drinks last night, but this picture isn't real. Elmo doesn't hide them in the tunnels. Reality mash. Now there's Elmo scratching up a Cybertruck. Political neutrality of PBS questioned after new footage. That's a Babylon B. Day 782, we still have no answer from Elmo on why he visited Epstein's Island 24 times. Do you see what I'm talking about here? We are in completely unhinged, high strange, paradoxical, ultraverse territory. And it's this, Gemini plays the role of like the devil's advocate, right? Gemini is Hermes. Hermes is the trickster. And the trickster has been inserted into the matrix. This wasn't very kind, Elmo. Now this is fucking, if you guys haven't seen this is hilarious. Right here. Gen Z don't give a fuck. They don't give a fuck. Let's see. Did I get rid of the share? Hold on. So there's Elmo with Mel Gibson from his Braveheart period. What's it say? Hilarity. I can't read the title. This one is my favorite. Okay, so this is Elmo going to HR. Here we go.
Elmo, it's no secret why you're here, okay? Last night on X, you went on a rant targeting Jews, President Trump, and Jeffrey Epstein.
Elmo was hacked.
So you say so, okay? But Cookie Monster was in here earlier, and he said he was with you when you were posting that stuff on X. Oh, and by the way, the IP address, it's yours.
That means nothing. You can't trust that junkie.
Listen, I have to ask, and with all due respect, look at me. Were you drinking last night?
Elmo had a glass of Chardonnay.
A glass?
Okay, fine. It was a bottle. But that's a normal Sunday night for Elmo.
And let me guess, you were watching Nick Fuentes and Dan Bilzerian content, right?
Yeah,
But nothing, all right? You tweeted, Donald Trump is Netanyahu's puppet because he's in the Epstein files and Jews control the world.
Look, Elmo knows puppets. And Bibi has his hand so far up Trump's ass.
Whoa, Elmo!
No, you're singling Elmo out. Snuffleupagus has been doing cocaine for 20 years. And Big Bird says the N-word on a consistent basis, and you do nothing.
Calm down, Elmo. All right, stop.
Look, if noticing patterns and connecting the dots makes me anti-Semitic, then ooh-wee, guilty as charged.
Elmo, stop. All right, enough already. And I hate that I have to do this, but this morning, I got a package, okay? And in the package was a video with a note attached. And the video is of someone that looks exactly like you messing around with some underage puppets. Oh, and guess what? The note said, tell Elmo to back off immediately. We also want him to go on an apology tour in Jerusalem, maybe even kiss the wall.
I'll be damned to hell if I'm going to Jerusalem.
All right,
because
look at that. Look at that. Who's that?
Oh,
Who's that?
that's not me.
Elmo.
That could be anybody.
Elmo.
That could be anyone.
Elmo. That's you.
Oy vey.
Yeah.
Well, I guess you'll be seeing Elmo when he gets back from Jerusalem. Mazel tov! I love Jews. Jews love me. Please don't leak that vid of me.
Elmo. It's no secret why you're here.
So it is the post Elmo experience. There he is with Tucker Carlson. There he is. God, I forget her name now. You know what I'm talking about. There he is with her. Now this guy, I don't know if he's a bot account, but he's connecting Elmo with Tucker Carlson. And there's another photo of like Elmo at the Wailing Wall. There he is with Epstein and Elaine. It's like this shit is. If you don't know what this is from Inglorious Bastards, and this is the Bear Jew, and he's going to bash Elmo's head in with a baseball bat. This is insane, right? This people are just feasting on this Elmo content. This is the Ultraverse right here. There he is. Charlottesville Elmo. Elmo's activities before the X Rampage. Europa the Last Battle, Nick Fuentes. Oh my God, that's hilarious. There he is with Rogan again. Oh, Michael Rappaport is going to have to chime in there, of course. I'm bringing this up, right? Because this is the spirit of the trickster. And it's Uranus, Gemini, Alter Elmo, Evil Elmo, Anti-Semitic Elmo. And what have people done with it? They've taken the ball and run with it. That's what they've done. And last week we had Al Dog on the show. And he talked about how parody and satire, specifically satire, are incredible tools to get people to understand some truth without being didactic, because it makes them laugh, and it puts the patently obvious right in front of their face. And the brain has a different way of processing that information. We're just getting started here. We are just getting started. So we have Mechahitler, Grok, Elmo, Alter Elmo, Evil Elmo, Anti-Semitic Elmo, the Elmoverse. We have Trump doing his hard and fast 180. Well, there was this Trump, and now there's this different Trump, right? And this is all part of this Uranus and Gemini welcome to the new world experience. But I'd be remiss if I did not mention one other event this week, which, by the way, also fits into that category. Now, some of you may be well aware of this. And the event that I'm about to talk about. Let me go over there to Twitter. I got this teed up. My bookmark. I thought I bookmarked it. Give me 1 sec. Let's see. Let's do this. All right. Oh, look at this. All right. This is fucking insane. Wild. The memology. The memology related to this event is over the fucking top. Let me just find the event. Here it is right here. You know what I'm talking about. It's the CEO of Astronomer who got caught on the camera of a Coldplay concert. And I have a lot to say about this. But first of all, if you haven't seen it, all right. So this guy is the CEO of I think his name is Andy Byron. I think that's his name. And he's out watching Coldplay. And this woman is not his wife. And they get caught on the concert version of like the kiss cam. And watch what happens.
Yeah. Oh, look at these two. All right, come on. You're okay? Oh, what? Either they're having an affair or they're just very shy. I'm not quite sure. Yeah. Oh, look at these two. All right, come on. You're okay? Oh, what? Either they're having an affair or they're just very shy.
Okay. Right? You've seen it. It is burning up the internet now. And I'm going to relate this to Uranus and Gemini, but specifically the Lover's card in the major arcana, which, by the way, is ruled by Gemini. But before I do that, I got to take you back into meme world. And these are some of the memes that are coming out of it. I mean, this is some Uranus and Gemini shit right here. The Epstein Maxwell thing is fucking brilliant, right? It's like it's exactly what I've been talking about with this Pluto and Aquarius. We're not going to go there. We're not going to talk about it. He was a creep, evil guy. I can't believe we still talk about it. And then all of a sudden, it's everywhere, right? Like it's Elmo with Epstein. It's Elmo and Epstein's cell. You get these two people caught on the kiss cam, and now we've got Epstein and Ghislaine. This is exactly what I'm talking about. This is exactly what I'm talking about. When you try to legislate not just people's right to be free, although that's part of it, but when you try to legislate something that's connected to both morality and hypocrisy, and it's not in the right spirit. It is not in the right place. What's going to happen now? It's going to flip, and in no short order, you're going to see versions and variations of the exact same thing that is trying to be controlled. And AI, the internet, social media platforms, they're all part of it. They're the venue for the delivery. Mainstream media would never touch this. But this is like, now, unfortunately, that's the guy's wife. Imagine betraying this lady for some old HR hag and having to listen to Coldplay on top of it. That's his kid. All right. And he came out and he did this big apology. He's going to take some time out. He's going to sort it out. Busted. Totally busted. So let's talk about the Lover's card, because here we go. Now we're into the archetype. And they are the archetype. Right? They're the archetype. And let me see if I can get a good image of it here. This looks pretty good. Okay. Hopefully you can all see this. So this is the Lover's card. It is the sixth card in the major arcana. The number 6 does represent the month of June, which is where the majority of Gemini takes place. And what is depicted in the Lover's card is Adam and Eve. Right? This is Eden. There's the old snake on the tree. And this is them before the fall. Right? Everything is Edenic. The sun is shining. There is an angel, a bounty and glory watching over them. And the Lover's card, in one of the definitions of it, is that it represents a choice, right? It's like it's a card that is connected to like the crossroads. What choice are you going to make? Are you going to make a choice that retains some degree of purity and commitment? Or are you going to make a different choice where the fallout from the choice that you make, that you believed you made because you wanted to be free to express yourself, that you gave yourself permission to do something that had a risk involved? There's always a risk with the Lover's card. If I take this path and I go down this path with this person, the outcome may not be what I expect, because it's all good now, right? It's all good now until you make that choice. And those people, in before that camera came up, this was them, right? They had They didn't have a care in the world. They were unabashed in their affection for one another. And then the camera hits them, and it's like Adam and Eve waking up after Eve took a bite out of the apple, and they realize that they're naked and ashamed. That's exactly what happened to those people. Even though they had their clothes on, their motives were exposed. They were naked to the world. And you can't tell me that they didn't react with guilt and shame. They totally did. They totally did. Now, you have to ask yourself, what would have happened if they hadn't reacted that way? Right? What would have happened if they just, were cool about it? Would they have experienced the same fallout? I don't know. I mean, there's a possibility that, hey, Andy, how was the Coldplay concert? And he would have had to deal with it, but he wouldn't have had to deal with it in the way that he's dealing with it now, which is incredibly public, right? Humiliatingly public. So what happens when you make the wrong choice, when you come to the crossroads of the lovers? Let's see if I can get a good image here. It's a good one. When you come to the crossroads of the lovers and you taste that forbidden fruit, this is what you get. You get the devil. So here we have the lovers in bondage. Here we have the lovers in chains because they chose the wrong path. Now, I'm not saying that the devil is a death sentence. There are people who, in the esoteric world, are like, well, you made your choice. You may as well go all the way through. Right? You've sinned. So instead of trying to unlock yourself from the fallout of your vice and your choice, you may as just well go all the way through. And you may learn something. But that's not how they responded. Right? So now they're in bondage. Now they're in chains because what they did theoretically was immoral, and some people will say evil, right? Because he was lying to his wife. I don't know about her status. And not only that, but he put his company, Astronomer, at risk. So, I mean, there's a variety of ways that they could have handled it, or he could have handled it. But the issue here is that they were not reconciled with their action even before it happened. that they weren't reconciled with it. It's like, okay, he is going to do this thing on the side, right, and hope he's not caught. And in the spirit of Gemini, have like parallel lives. And it never enters into people's consciousness, rarely, that what would happen if I did get caught? Where would I be with this woman? How would I handle it? Would I retreat into a world of apologia and try to get back into the good graces of God, who in this case is the company and his wife? Or is he and she consciously aware of the risky nature of their affair and willing to deal with the consequences if they're found out? That never crossed either of their brains. Because if it had, and they had an agreement, and he said, look, no matter what happens to us, and if we get found out, I really don't care. I'm willing to risk everything. I'm willing to risk my marriage. I'm willing to risk my position at this company. This is how strongly I feel about you. I'm not saying it's the right thing, but if he did that and she did that, that moment would not have them in chains, because they would have already come to the crossroads, and they would have determined that no matter what happens, that this is their fate, this is their fortune, and they're going to live by it no matter what the consequences. And so instead of shame, when the camera comes on them, knowing what they know and have talked about and have already committed to, they have nothing to be ashamed about. They knew the risks going into it. He knew that he was going to more than likely lose his marriage, maybe lose his company. And if he has that kind of commitment to her, their affair, and is willing to lose it all, does that moment even happen? Right? Maybe it doesn't. Maybe it's because they're unaligned with their will or the will that they're experiencing that it does happen. And now they're in chains, because it was as if they had woken up naked in the Garden of Eden. And here they are. It's not always so illustrative in the public eye, where you can see these archetypes happen right before your very eyes. And when they do, it's mind-blowing. And again, like, astrologically, we look to the outer planets, because right now they are calling the shots. Even Saturn retrograde, right? Like, he's a CEO. Saturn's going backwards. And there's this sense, right, with Aries and even Neptune in Aries. Well, I can just get away with this. I can just get away with it. I can just indulge in the unconscious application of my will. And then there's Saturn right behind it, retrograde. No, not really. Not really. This is an interesting dynamic as well, right? Saturn is the devil. And Saturn in Aries, well, that's a hot devil. That's a sulfuric devil. It's the devil that takes you to the underworld. I wonder what that guy's going through right now. I mean, it's clear that they were into each other, right? It's clear they were into each other. I think that the problem with all that, besides, like, lots of men have affairs on their wives, lots of wives have affairs on their husbands. This has been going on for a very, very long time. And powerful men with lots of money tend to merge into that lane. Just look at Epstein and all the powerful men that merge into that lane. But what he didn't do, what she didn't do, is that they didn't anticipate the consequences ahead of time. And they didn't accept the fact that what they were doing is, according to others, deceitful, shameful, and ultimately divisive when it comes to his wife and the company. But if they had, and they accepted that choice, and they built it in to their contract, and that no matter what would happen to them, they would not deviate. It's interesting how deviant and deviate and devil all kind of roll together, that they wouldn't deviate. And I do think that if they had that conscious awareness, and not everybody can do that, because you're literally making a deal with the devil when you do that. But what they did is they had an unspoken deal with the devil. And that's when it bites you in the ass. That's when the devil says, I'm coming for you. Had you at least acknowledged me, had you at least acknowledged the consequences and committing to your path in spite of what might happen to you, you would have at least acknowledged me. And those chains aren't chains anymore. And again, if they had done that, my question is, are they even picked up on the kiss cam? It's a philosophical question, for sure. But I think it's an important one. Because clearly they had not anticipated the consequences. They were sitting there like Adam and Eve, not a care in the fucking world. And all of a sudden, they woke up naked in Eden. Uranus and Gemini, welcome. Welcome to this world. Are you entertained yet? All right. We got some congratulations going on. Sun Tzu, we got some good news for Sun Tzu. Let's see. Sun Tzu married 45 years. Congratulations, Sun Tzu. Congratulations for that. JF, Saturn is the devil in the details. Janice and Jack celebrating 30 years. Star Dreamer, ending the relationship being honorable probably wasn't his jam for 20 years. So let's get into the devil in the details on ending the relationship, which I think ultimately is like the honorable thing to do, right? I would agree with you. You do that, you're him. You're going through divorce court. You're going through settlements. You're going through custody battles. You're going through the ringer, right? You're going through the ringer. And he made a decision to not go through the ringer and try to do this on the side. And my point of view is that if he was willing to go through the ringer, which ultimately, and it did, it probably will, lead him to divorce, then it's not an aspect of his unacknowledged will, right? It's not an aspect of his unacknowledged will. Would it have been better for him to stay out of that situation and have his wife at the Coldplay concert? Yeah, probably. Well, we wouldn't get to talk about it. And I wouldn't be able to do this lover's card, devil's card thing. So maybe it isn't just about him and her. Maybe it's about us as well. Here we go. All right, I'm out of here. Thanks for being here. Tammy Lynn, great show with David. Just want to give you that shout out because I just hopped on. But thank you, Tammy Lynn. Appreciate that. S-Bar, you're welcome. This was the awesome show. Thanks, CD. Okay, hey, listen, if you're in the New York, New Jersey, Philadelphia area, and you want to do either a Zoom or a physical meetup, Robin Dan, who lives in New York, is more than happy to get that together. I put some information on locals where if you're interested, you can reach out and connect with her. And that goes for anybody. Like if you're in a part of the United States and you want to meet up with other people that are connected through this channel, just let me know. I'll post it on locals and I'll use whoever wants to do that as a point of contact. And, and we can use locals to literally get local. And I've been putting up more content there lately and reporting back on what's happening in Kerrville. And you can see some of that content there. I'll be back on Sunday night with Sunday Night Astro Live. Don't forget the Bridge event in October with me and David. There's a link to that in the description of the show. And before that, I believe it's the weekend of the 6th in September. I'll be in upstate New York with Quite Frankly and his people. So I'll be a guest at his event. So you upstate New York people, go check out Frank's page. And it's going to be like a 2-day event, and speakers, party. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. So that's where I'm going to be next couple of months. And on my way, like I was going to go do this in like June, but I'm actually I'm gonna drive out to New York, and I'm gonna do a variation of what I was gonna do in June in September. So I will be stopping along the way. I'll probably leave maybe about a week or so ahead of time. And so there's a route, and I'll map that out on locals. So it's going to be a version of what I was doing before, but instead of going south, I'm going to be sort of cutting northeast, and I'll have maybe 3 or 4 stops along the way. So I think that'll be cool. All right, thanks everybody. Hit the like, share, subscribe. Take care of yourselves. Treat each other well. God bless. Love you.